John Lee further explains the need for Beijing's interpretation of the national security law. A reminder about an expected fall in the local temperature tomorrow night. And Rishi Sunak says the UK's golden era with China is over. Hello and welcome to TVB News. The Department of Justice has written to the Court of First Instance seeking an adjournment of Next Digital founder Jimmy Lai's national security trial. Chief Executive John Lee said this morning it would be most appropriate for the court to handle the case after Beijing's interpretation of the national security law. Christy Kahn with more.
The Court of Final Appeal yesterday rejected a bid by the Department of Justice to block King's Counsel Timothy Owen from representing media tycoon Jimmy Lai in his national security trial that's set to begin on Thursday. After the court's ruling, the chief executive announced that he was asking the National People's Congress Standing Committee to interpret the national security law. The SAR authorities want a clarification on whether overseas solicitors or barristers who are not qualified to practice generally in Hong Kong are allowed to take part in the Hong Kong's national security cases. Speaking to reporters today, John Lee said he believes the central government will handle the matter expeditiously.
I have made the request in my report to the Central People's Government for interpretation of the Hong Kong national security law to address the question I have already explained. It will be up to the National People's Congress Standing Committee to decide how to go about it. How eventually, as a result of my request, the interpretation will be made, of course, is the prerogative and the absolute authority of the NPCSC. I will leave it to the decision of the NPCSC.
Lee added that the interpretation of the law would only target lawyers registered overseas, but not the foreign lawyers listed in Hong Kong. Meanwhile, the Hong Kong Bar Association told reporters that the NPCSC is entitled to exercise its power and right to interpret the law under Article 65 of the National Security Law.
The NSL is a relatively new piece of legislation, and we hope that any ambiguity can be clarified by our court in the future, and the power to interpret under Article 65 can be exercised sparingly.
The Hong Kong Bar Association said using interpretation to deal with this situation will always result in doubts and discussions. But the group is confident that this won't affect the defendant's right to a fair trial. The chairman of the association added that the courts and the legal profession will continue their work on safeguarding national security, upholding the rule of law, and maintaining judicial independence in the city. He emphasized that barring overseas barristers from taking part in national security cases will not undermine the defendant's rights and freedom in legal representation. He noted that Hong Kong has sufficient lawyers to handle national security cases. Christy Kahn, TVB News.
The observatory has forecast that the local temperature will dip to as low as 15 degrees tomorrow night as a cold front is approaching the territory. Although the temperature reached a high of 29 degrees today, it is expected to fall to 13 degrees on Thursday and Friday in the urban area. And the cool weather is expected to last a couple of days. Mara Wong, the Chief Executive Officer of the Senior Citizen Home Safety Association, said senior citizens should be well prepared for the drastic change of the weather, adding that they should seek help if necessary. Meanwhile, the observatory said this winter will be generally warmer than before.
Hong Kong, just like many places in the world, are under the influence of global warming, so that in general, there's a general trend for the temperature to increase. And therefore, in the coming winter, the temperature will also is expected to be in the normal to above normal range.
Hong Kong logged 7,547 new COVID cases, slightly fewer than yesterday's tally. 590 cases were imported. No infections involving mutant strains were found. 41 residents and staff members from 23 care homes for the elderly and the disabled were infected, while 75 people were listed as their close contacts. 1,757 new infections were reported from 807 schools. 33 classes across 28 schools have to be suspended for a week. 13 more patients succumbed to the virus, bringing the city's pandemic death toll during the fifth wave to 10,518. The mainland's tally for new COVID infections fell below 40,000 today, about 1,000 fewer than yesterday. Local authorities said they would try their best to mitigate the impact COVID control measures have on people's daily lives. Christy Khan has more.
The mainland logged 38,421 new locally acquired COVID cases today. At a press conference this afternoon, National Health Commission spokesman Mi Feng said authorities will move swiftly to resolve the difficulties faced by people who are under COVID restrictions. Responding to questions on recent protests against anti-COVID control measures, Mi said the people's anger was not aimed at the policy itself, but more about how it was implemented. Mi said authorities will further fine-tune COVID control measures to reduce its impact on society. Meanwhile, Guangdong province logged 8,893 new COVID infections, most of them in the capital Guangzhou. In Guangzhou's Yuexiu district, large-scale events were suspended and public spaces closed, except a few to ensure residents are able to meet their daily needs. Yuexiu residents were urged to stay at home from today until Saturday to help curb transmission of the virus. Southwest China's megacity Chongqing logged 8,792 new cases, while Beijing recorded 4,386. Sichuan, Xinjiang, Shanxi provinces all registered more than 1,000 cases today. Christy Khan, TVB News.
China's Shenzhou 15 spacecraft is ready for launch at 11:08 tonight at the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center after scientists conducted a final check. The authorities said they have refueled the rocket and it's on track for a successful launch this evening. It is the first time a manned spaceship is launching in temperature conditions as low as -23 degrees Celsius. The Shenzhou 15 spacecraft will carry 3 astronauts, Fei Junlong, Deng Qingming, and Zhang Lu. They will stay aboard the space station with the 3 astronauts from Shenzhou 14. This is the first time for China's manned space program to run 2 Shenzhou spacecraft at the same time and have their first ever in-orbit crew rotation. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has delivered his first major foreign policy speech since taking office. Speaking at the annual Lord Mayor's banquet in London on Monday, Sunak stated that China poses a systemic challenge to the UK's values and interests. He also condemned Russia's attacks on civilian infrastructure in Ukraine and said that Britain would support Kyiv for as long as it takes. Daniel Rao tells us more.
During his first major foreign policy speech as British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak emphasised the need for the UK's relationship with China to evolve. He also criticised Beijing's response to protests in China against the government's anti-COVID policies.
We also need to evolve our approach to China. Now let's be clear, the so-called golden era is over, along with the naive idea that trade would automatically lead to social and political reform. But nor should we rely on simplistic Cold War rhetoric. We recognise China poses a systemic challenge to our values and interests, a challenge that grows more acute as it moves towards even greater authoritarianism. Instead of listening to their people's protests, the Chinese government has chosen to crack down further, including by assaulting a BBC journalist.
The term golden era referred to by Sunak relates to a thaw of China-UK tensions between 2010 and the latter part of the previous decade. During this period of time, Britain and China significantly strengthened their economic cooperation. President Xi Jinping also embarked on a state visit to the UK in October 2015. In his speech, Sunak added the UK would stand up to global competitors like China, not with grand rhetoric, but with robust pragmatism, and by bolstering its ties with like-minded global allies, including the US, Canada, Australia, and Japan. Still, Sunak stopped short of calling China a threat, in contrast to the stances he outlined while facing off against Liz Truss in the Conservative Party leadership contest over the summer. In July, he said China represented the largest threat to Britain and to the world's security and prosperity. At the time, Sunak pledged to close all Confucius Institutes, the partially Chinese government-funded organizations that promote Chinese culture and language at UK universities. He also said he would lead an international alliance against alleged Chinese cyber threats and help British companies and universities counter what he called Chinese spying. Sunak's apparent softening of his rhetoric on China in his maiden foreign policy speech as Prime Minister sparked criticism from certain factions of the Conservative Party. On Ukraine, Sunak indicated no change with the policy pursued by his predecessors as Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. Sunak said Britain will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes, and that the UK will maintain or increase its military aid for Kyiv next year, as well as providing new support for air defence. The Foreign Ministry hit back at the British Prime Minister's allegations that a BBC journalist had been assaulted while reporting on protests against pandemic control measures in China. The ministry said the remarks of the British side are a serious distortion of facts and constitute grave interference in China's internal affairs. It added the BBC twisted the story and propagated the narrative that its journalist had been arrested and beaten by the police. The ministry said the individual was allowed to leave the scene after being cautioned and identified by Shanghai authorities, having not initially clarified that he was a journalist while present at the protest. Dan Orell, TVB News.
Security forces in Somalia stormed a hotel in the capital, Mogadishu, where Islamic extremists had been holed up for more than 18 hours after killing 8 civilians and trapping many more in the building. Police said all 6 extremists died during the operation at the Villa Rosa Hotel. It's located near the seat of Somalia's federal government and has a restaurant popular with officials. 5 of the attackers were killed by security forces and 1 blew himself up. 1 member of the security forces was also killed, and about 60 people who had been trapped in the hotel were freed, with none having sustained injuries. Islamic extremist group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack. The group controls large parts of central and southern Somalia and seeks to take power and enforce a strict version of Sharia law nationwide. Welcome back. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and his NATO counterparts are in Romania to encourage urgent material aid for Ukraine, including electrical components for the country's devastated power network. Ukraine's grid has been battered since early October by targeted Russian strikes in what U.S. officials call a Russian campaign to weaponize the winter cold. NATO's Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said they need to be prepared for more attacks by Russia. Nazvi Karim has more.
This is a point of invincibility station in Bucha, Ukraine, just outside of the capital, Kyiv. It is one of around 1,000 set up across the country, providing Ukrainians with relief from the lack of power and water caused by Russian missile attacks. These tents are also a symbol of defiance for many, with Ukrainians wanting to show Moscow that they will survive, even amid Russia's almost weekly barrages and sub-zero freezing cold weather. They can also take solace in the knowledge that they are not alone in their quest for respite. In Kyiv and in Bucharest, Romania, allies are coming together to find ways to help Ukraine repair its infrastructure. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Romania ahead of meetings with NATO allies and foreign ministers from the Group of 7 advanced economies. Blinken is set to announce new assistance to help restore Ukraine's power transmission ability. Washington has also been encouraging other countries to do the same, with rolling blackouts in Kyiv and other cities, leaving millions of people without power and heating. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg highlighted the need to boost Ukraine's air defense capabilities.
And I expect that one of the messages from the foreign ministerial meeting here in Bucharest will be the need to further step up the provision both of air defense systems, but also, of course, spare parts, training and ammunition to the different air defense systems, because we need to help Ukraine to defend themselves against this horrific type of warfare.
In Kyiv, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky met foreign ministers of Nordic and Baltic countries. The delegation included the leading officials from Estonia, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway, Finland and Sweden. They said the goal was to help Ukrainians cope with their coldest months of need and keep their resolve high. They also denounced Russia for weaponizing civilian energy. Nazri Karim, TVB News.
Hawaii's Mauna Loa, the world's largest active volcano, started erupting Monday for the first time in nearly 40 years. For now, lava is not threatening homes or communities, and no evacuation orders have been issued. But that could change, as lava could eventually reach populated areas in about a week. Tracy Furness has more.
Waves of orange glowing lava and smoky ash belched and sputtered Monday from the world's largest active volcano. Mauna Loa last erupted in 1984. For residents living on Hawaii's Big Island, officials told them to be ready in the event of a worst-case scenario.
Certainly, I just would want to encourage everyone, especially those on the Big Island, to be vigilant. Lava flows are not threatening any downslope communities at this time. Volcanic gas and possibly fine ash and Pele's hair may be carried downwind, so certainly we would ask those with respiratory sensitivities to take precautions to minimize exposure.
Many current residents were not living there when Mauna Loa last erupted 38 years ago. There has been a surge of development on the Big Island in recent decades. Its population has more than doubled from 92,000 in 1980. Most people on the island live in the city of Kuala Kona, to the west of the volcano. The city has 23,000 people, and Hilo to the east has 45,000 residents. Officials are worried about several subdivisions some 30 miles south of the volcano, which are home to about 5,000 people. The U.S. Geological Survey has been alert because of a recent spike in earthquakes at the summit of the volcano. Although lava flows are contained within the summit area and were not threatening communities, authorities have urged residents to review their eruption preparations.
We don't want to try and second guess the volcano. We have to let it actually show us what it's going to do, and then we inform people of what is happening ASAP.
We've taken the threat of Mauna Loa eruption seriously. Every time that it's escalated, we're way overdue. We were way overdue for Mauna Loa eruption. And so we had prepared.
Mauna Loa rises 4,169 meters above sea level and is larger than neighboring Kilauea volcano, which erupted in a residential neighborhood and destroyed 700 homes in 2018. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Today is the last day of opening for Ha Par Mansion, also known as the Tiger Bomb Villa. Jackie Lynn takes a look at the Tiger's Den before it closes its doors to the public.
Crossover of classical Chinese and Western architectural elements, Ha Par Mansion boasts a history of more than 85 years and has been classified as a Grade 1 heritage building. Sprawled across the foot of Jardines Lookout in Tai Hang, the ornamental complex has been revitalized to host music-themed events and performances, but will soon close their doors to the public. This woman said the landmark has held the collective memory of her generation. This woman recalled the iconic diorama there, which depicted scenes of tortures in the lower realms of hell. Soon shuttered, some rented the villa for private events. Ha Par Mansion was originally owned by a Burmese-Chinese businessman, Aw Poon Ho, whose father made his name in the Chinese medicine market through the popular ointment Tiger Balm. In 2011, the villa was handed to the government for revitalization works, which cost some $170 million. Buckling under financial strains, its current operator, Hall Park Music, will hand the mansion back to the government for management on Thursday, much earlier than the originally planned year of return in 2025. With the villa's fate up in the air, authorities say the management of the villa will be put out to tender with no timeline provided yet. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
That's the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.